They tried to erase this trick from every psychology manual for one reason. It works too well. Not with threats, not with violence, but with words, delivered in a way that silently flips your instincts. It was used in classified military experiments and then blacklisted by behavioral experts who feared its potential. You were never meant to hear about this, but now you will. Just know, once you understand it, there's no going back. You'll see people differently, and more importantly, they'll feel that difference when they're around you. Ready? Let's begin. Chapter 1. Why you've never heard this before. This psychological technique was never intended for public knowledge. It was crafted for high-stakes scenarios, military interrogations, political negotiations, and covert operations, where influence had to happen without force. But something went wrong. The results were too consistent, too precise. People obeyed without realizing they were being guided. That unsettled the experts. It was not just effective, it was unstoppable. So it was pulled from training programs, classified, and buried. Years later, a former behavioral specialist leaked a single fragment of it. One small piece. The rest is still locked away. What you're about to discover is built from that leak. A subtle insight so powerful, it can quietly control conversations, decisions, and even people without them ever noticing it happened. And once you hear it, you won't unsee it. Most people believe we make decisions based on logic, reason, or careful thought. But that's a comforting lie. In reality, the human brain responds first to patterns, rhythm, tone, and presence, long before logic even has a chance to process anything. It's not about what someone says, it's about how they say it, how they look at you, and how they make you feel in the first few seconds. This is why trained manipulators don't argue. They control the tempo. They don't convince. They create the illusion of agreement. Your mind is not evaluating facts. It's scanning for dominance, trust, threat, or safety, all in microseconds. That's the limbic system at work, the survival brain. By the time logic kicks in, your instincts have already made the decision. Understanding this flips the game. You stop trying to win with words, and instead you master what actually moves people: rhythm, presence, and psychological positioning. That's the truth they never taught you. Chapter 2. The experiment that broke the rules. In the early 1980s, a classified behavioral experiment was conducted by a military-affiliated research unit. The goal was to test non-violent compliance, how far someone could be guided without force, threats, or authority titles. The setup was simple: a trained soldier placed in a room across from a single man. No weapons, no interrogation, just silence. The man did not shout, threaten, or even ask questions. He simply watched, paused, and spoke in a calm, calculated rhythm. What followed shocked the researchers. Within minutes, hardened soldiers began to comply. They followed instructions that were not even clearly given. They answered unasked questions. They mirrored body language unconsciously. When asked why, their responses were vague. It just felt right. But they could not explain why it felt right. That's when the researchers realized logic had been bypassed. This was not persuasion. It was neurological control. It slipped past defenses and went straight to instinct. The subject in the room was not speaking to their minds. He was triggering their survival brain. The experiment was immediately shut down. The technique was labeled unstable, unpredictable, and too dangerous to teach. The files were sealed, and the tactic quietly disappeared, until now. Most people think they make decisions using logic, but real decisions, especially emotional, social, or quick ones, are made by the limbic system, the brain's ancient survival center. This part doesn't think in words or facts. It reacts. It scans for dominance, safety, status, and power in milliseconds. The trick used in the experiment did not persuade soldiers logically. It bypassed their conscious thoughts and went straight to this instinctive part of the brain. That's why they couldn't explain their obedience. It was not a choice, it was a response. When someone speaks in a certain rhythm, holds eye contact just right, and maintains tension through silence, the brain interprets it as authority, not because of what's said, but how it's delivered. It's like hacking the human operating system. Logic doesn't stand a chance because the decision was already made before reason even showed up. That's why this technique is so powerful and so dangerous. Chapter 3. The 4-step psychological pattern of control. This technique works not because it's loud or aggressive, but because it's subtle, precise, and invisible to most people. It's built on 4 steps, each one designed to trigger a reaction deep in the brain before logic even steps in. Step 1. The strategic pause. Silence alone is not powerful, but tension inside silence is. This step starts with a pause that's just long enough to make the other person uncomfortable. You don't fill the space, you hold it. Why? Because the brain hates unanswered questions. The moment you pause, their mind starts racing. Why is not he speaking? What's he thinking? Am I being judged? That internal questioning shifts their focus away from resistance and toward self-doubt. The pause becomes a psychological mirror. They start analyzing themselves, not you. Step 2. Precision eye contact. Most people either stare too hard or avoid eye contact entirely. This step requires balance, controlled uncertainty. You make eye contact just long enough to show presence, but not long enough to threaten. You hold the gaze briefly, then break it deliberately. This makes the other person question your intentions, your confidence, and your position. Their limbic brain begins reading you as someone who's calm, in control, and potentially dominant. That uncertainty softens their resistance and subtly shifts the power dynamic in your favor. Step 3. Behavioral mirroring and rhythmic speech. Once the tension and uncertainty are in place, you build subconscious trust. You do this by mirroring their body language, not mimicking, but subtly reflecting posture, tone, and speech rhythm. The brain interprets this as, "You're like me." This lowers defenses and creates a feeling of familiarity. Then, speak in a calm, rhythmic cadence. The rhythm bypasses the logical mind and creates a trance-like effect. People stop evaluating what you're saying and start feeling it. They begin to follow, not because of the words, but because of how it feels. Step 4. Break the pattern. This is the disruptor. After setting rhythm and trust, you introduce an unexpected move, a sudden change in tone, a surprising question, or a quiet statement that breaks the flow. This creates a freeze response in the brain. In that split-second confusion, you insert your suggestion or command. The mind, searching for direction, latches onto your message. It feels self-generated, but you placed it there. Used together, these 4 steps form a behavioral loop that quietly guides others toward agreement, without pressure, without force. Chapter 4. The one signal that finalized obedience. There was one final signal that sealed the effect. One action that made everything else click into place. It wasn't a phrase or a gesture. It was the slow blink. Not lazy, not sleepy, controlled. In nature, predators use the slow blink to signal calm dominance. Lions do it. Wolves do it. It tells others, "I'm not afraid. I'm not in a rush. I control this space." And the human brain reads it the same way. When timed right, usually after someone finishes speaking, a slow blink sends a silent message. "I'm above this moment. I'm in charge." It doesn't create fear, it creates submission without resistance. Paired with the previous steps, the pause, the eye contact, the rhythm, and the break-in pattern, the slow blink becomes the anchor. It finalizes the psychological loop. The limbic brain sees it and instantly labels the person as a leader, a figure to follow. This one non-verbal cue activates all the subconscious wiring that says, trust them, obey them, don't question why. And that's why it worked. Even on trained soldiers. Chapter 5. Why this technique was banned. This technique wasn't just powerful, it was dangerous. After the experiment, researchers noticed something disturbing. Even when soldiers were told they were being manipulated, it still worked. They walked into the room expecting to resist. Some even laughed about it before the test, but minutes later, they were complying, answering unasked questions, and lowering their defenses without realizing it. That terrified the people behind the project. This was not persuasion. This was neurological override. It bypassed awareness, bypassed training, and triggered obedience at the primal level. It did not matter how educated, logical, or disciplined someone was. Once the loop was activated, resistance shut down. The potential applications were endless, and that's what made it a threat. Governments feared it could be abused. Agencies could not control who learned it, so the files were sealed, the research buried, and the technique quietly banned from future use. But now, part of it is resurfacing, and you're one of the few hearing it before it disappears again. This technique only works if your energy matches your behavior. You can't fake control. If your words say dominance, but your body says insecurity, people will sense the disconnect instantly. And when that illusion breaks, they won't just stop trusting you, they'll turn on you. The brain is wired to detect inconsistency as a threat. So instead of gaining influence, you create suspicion. That's why this method isn't meant to be used for deception. It's meant for presence, clarity, and leadership. Use it to guide, not to manipulate. Because once you break that invisible signal of trust, it's nearly impossible to rebuild. Power must be grounded. If it's not real, it will collapse the moment it's tested. Now you know the pattern, the same one used by elite negotiators, covert operatives, and psychological strategists. Most people will never notice it, and even fewer will understand how it works. But you do. That knowledge alone separates you from 99% of the world. Still, this is just the surface. The deeper techniques, the ones that don't just shift conversations but control entire environments, remain hidden. You've unlocked the first door. What you do next decides whether this power stays an idea or becomes something you use. You've seen what's possible. Now ask yourself, are you ready to go further? If you're ready to go deeper, there's a private channel I've created where the real tactics live. No filters, no surface-level tricks. Just raw, unfiltered psychological strategies, too direct for public platforms. This is not for everyone. Most people are not ready to handle that level of control. But if you are, the link is in the description and pinned comment. Enter at your own risk. Once you see what's inside, your view of influence, power, and human behavior will never be the same. This is your invite, no pressure. But don't expect that door to stay open forever. Subscribe.